Good afternoon, everybody. It's Eugenie Drakes speaking. I think you were expecting Melanie Brummer, but this has started as a challenge which just inspired me so much. Melanie spoke to me last week, and at the end of the conversation, I said to her, Melanie, we want to know more about you. I would love to interview you. And I was being cheeky. And there was like a 2-second pause, and then Melanie said, yes. So here we are, and I feel really honored and privileged to be interviewing you, to ask questions that I'm curious about, but also, Melanie, to pay tribute to you for the incredible impact that you've had just quietly, focusedly, steaming ahead. So for those of you who don't know, Melanie started selling dyed t-shirts at flea markets, then custom designed fabrics to established fashion designers. Her creativity was combined with those of the designers, and her fabrics were seen at many fashion weeks. And she worked with people like Marianne Fassler and designers like that. So we're not talking Minnie Mouse, and we're not talking Mickey Mouse, we're talking real creativity and showcasing. Melanie then went on to launch her own dye range, traveled around the country doing workshops, doing trainings. She's a published author, not only in South Africa, but in the USA and Canada. She's got an online school. She started the Upcycle Cloth Collective, spanning continents. She has an academy. She's just, and for me, the thing that I love most is she's just a beautiful, open-hearted, generous human. Melanie, where did this all start?
Well, I think my journey with entrepreneurship started in 1993 when I found myself in a place where I didn't really want to work for a boss, and I didn't really know what to do with my life, but I really felt that I wanted to take charge of my own ship. And the thing that's fascinated me through my adult life the most is that the difference between somebody who is unemployed and somebody who is self-employed is just a mind shift. It's one small decision in your mind to say, instead of depending on somebody else for my livelihood, I'm going to create it for myself. And for me, that was just magical. And I had no clue. I was only 23 years old. I'd been working in casinos since I'd left high school, so I didn't really have any business acumen. And although I had learned about business, I suppose, from my father for the first time, I remember when I was very small, actually, he used to take me to his office during the December holidays when his receptionist was on leave and no one else was there, and he would work overtime. And he would take me to his office and he would leave me sitting in a chair and actually allow this little thing to answer the telephone for him. So business people would phone during December and they'd answer the phone, and this tiny child would very professionally say, "Hello, Ian Brummer Architects, how can I help you?" And then I would put the calls through to him. And I think perhaps that influence then carried forward into my adult life, where I realized that I could do it myself. I wasn't sure how, but I was ready to learn it on the fly. And so at the time when I was 23, I had really no money. But I'd said to all of my friends, I'm going to do this. I'm going to start a business. So I went to the Oriental Plaza and I spent the 400 or 300 Rand that I had. And I bought some t-shirts and some dye at the pharmacy. And I had a book at home that had a whole 3 pages of information in about tie-dye. And I made some t-shirts and people were ready to buy them. So I would make them and sell them and then take the money that I got from that and I'd make some more and sell those and then it just became a wheel where I just made sure that every time I sold them, I went out and I replaced the stock and bought a few more. So it was never about using more than I could make out of the business. And over a period of about 8 years, I eventually built up a stock holding of t-shirts that I was, of all sorts of garments that I was selling at the flea markets, of about 35,000 rands worth of stock holding that I would carry with me every Saturday and Sunday to the markets, unpack at the markets, and then sell them. And then on Monday, I was off to my suppliers with the cash I'd made on the Sunday and the Saturday to replace the stock, buy a few more than what I'd sold, and keep the wheel going in that way.
That's awesome, because I think for me there sits a very valuable lesson for people wanting to be an entrepreneur, just in terms of growing small, growing step by step, and every time just adding that little bit more, adding that little bit more, but doing it strategically and carefully.
Yes, yes. That phase of my career came to an end because I actually got quite ill. I was working 7 days a week. I was often working inhumane hours. In my 20s, I had a huge amount of energy, and I would typically work an all-nighter on a Thursday night. So I would work right through the night on a Thursday night. And that was every week. It was relentless. And you know about flea markets, they don't really close. They close for 2 weekends a year between Christmas and New Year. And the rest of the year they operate. So I was always in a perpetual wheel of working. And I eventually burned out and actually couldn't continue with it anymore. And I stopped doing that for a year or two and actually had to, a very confused couple of years where I felt as though I'd lost a child or something, because I'd had to shut down this thing that I'd invested so much energy in. And then in 2001, 2002, I found myself in an abusive relationship that I'd co-created with a guy. And in defiance, I said to him one day, I'm going to start my own business, because he'd always said that if I got a job, the relationship would be over. So he was like, okay, do your worst, what have you got to start with? And I phoned my mom and I said to her, Mom, please will you help me with enough money to put in a landline where I live? And I got a telephone directory. And I sat with that telephone book and I phoned every single clothing company that I could find in that telephone book. And I asked them if they would meet with me, and I took them my fabric samples. And I asked the buyers if they would consider buying fabric finishes from me. And I always say that I got lucky when I got to L, because I phoned this company called Leopard Frock, and in truthfulness, I really didn't know that it was Marianne Fassler's brand. I had no idea. I was an absolute ignoramus about the fashion industry. All I knew was that I'd made these finishes before. I had enough expertise and enough courage to offer them to others. And if you look at a phone book, you will know that there are literally thousands of clothing companies between A and L. And of course, I phoned the business and I got an interview with a buyer, and I went in to see them, and I poured out my fabrics on the table. And I remember when I got to Marianne's house, I was mortified. I was like, I was terrified because I almost turned back. But I had the interview, and she said that she would take some stuff from me, and we'd start. And then after that, it followed a process of about 6 years where I was there on an almost weekly basis, collecting stock and dropping it off. I didn't do a lot of work for her catwalk collections, but I did ongoing work for her Sibella range, which was the children's collection that they had going. And
Sorry, I'm going to carry on.
yes.
No, I'm just going to, for those who don't know who Marianne Fassler is, she is one of our leading fashion designers. She's an incredibly an incredibly talented and really revered designer. So to work with her is not small. It's big.
Yeah, it was really probably the luckiest thing that has ever happened to me in my life. And I truly believe that it was luck that came to me because I'd been courageous enough to just fight all the odds and do whatever it took to get there. And once I had her as a client, it was very, very easy then to sell what I did to other designers. By 2005, I was working for Stone Cherry, Sun Goddess, Black Coffee, David Clale, Marion and Lindy, a whole bunch of designers. It just from there, it just opened the doors. And I can really recommend it as a strategy for anybody who's starting out is try to sell your products, try to upsell them to somebody in your industry who has a name, and then leverage off that to get your products out to other people.
It's a great tip.
Yeah, thank you.
So from fashion into dyes.
So what happened was when I was manufacturing for the fashion industry, I went very much, although now I was working on other people's textiles, I still fell into the same pattern that I understood from my previous business, which was when I didn't have enough money, I'd just work harder and I'd just work longer hours. So I was dyeing 100 garments a week or 100 meters of fabric a week with my own hands. And once again, I was in the cycle of working inhumane hours, and it was making me quite sick because I was up in the middle of the night. I remember doing a job for Strangelove where my washing machines all broke down in the course of doing the job because the fabric gave off so much fraying and stuff. And because I was working to a deadline, I had a tight chest and flu, and I ended up standing outside with a hose pipe in the middle of the night, in the middle of winter, rinsing out fabric on a plot in honeydew with no security. And it was, I think, one of the most dangerous things I ever did. And after that, I realized that I needed to shift the business slightly, or I had to do something. So I read an entrepreneur magazine, and it suggested that a good way to build a business is to find a product that is replicable, that you can easily replicate. Now, at that point, I had a custom business, and I was the only one who could do what I did the way I did it. Every time I tried to bring in staff, the quality would suffer. So at that point, I cooked up a kit, a tie-dye kit that I could sell into craft shops. And then for a period of time, I ran the two businesses because they really were two essentially different businesses. I tried to run them parallel to each other. So I was still manufacturing custom textiles, but then I had this kit that I was trying to sell to craft stores. And by 2008, I realized that it was not sustainable. I couldn't do both things. I couldn't do both things at a level that was required. So I decided to pick back the business that was replicable and scalable. And I then focused my energy on the craft kits. And that was where I started teaching more, because I then needed to teach people how to use these kits. And that was where I started to travel around the country and to teach. And I would teach anybody, anywhere. I particularly loved teaching into skills development centers and going to people in nonprofits and in NGOs. And I had some really, really moving experiences working with refugees and abused people. And it was just really amazing to see the lights come on in their eyes when I could convince them that if they could just change their minds, they needn't be unemployed people, they could become self-employed people, and that they could do it with very little resources, because I had.
That's incredible, because again, for me, it's, and I just love that with dye. You were teaching dyeing, so you were actually bringing color into spaces
Yes.
where there was no color,
Yes. Yes.
and changing lives, and that's just incredible.
Yeah, that part of my work, I sometimes look back on my career and realize that maybe I've just found a way to feed the two things that I love the most. And the one is working with color and textiles, and the other is turning the lights on in people. And very often, I was at a business incubator for a while where the guy in charge one day grabbed me by the shoulders and shook me. He said, "I'm so tired of you working on the bleeding edge." Because I said to him, "But I'm on the leading edge." And he's like, "You're on the bleeding edge. Get off it." And I was like, "But that's that's the place of meaning for me to work, because these are people who need it more than anybody. These are people who can't afford this stuff. These are the people I need to take it to, is not the people who can afford the services, but the people who can't afford the services. They're the ones who need this stuff. And if I can create some sort of an income for myself in one way that then frees up enough time for me to take on the social causes that I believe in, then I'm in my happy place. Because the reality is, social entrepreneurs find it very, very hard to get paid for what they do. So what I tend to do is I tend to create a business model that will kind of make me enough money to feed myself and do a few things on the side. And then that frees up some time so that I can then work on the things that I really care about.
And you care deeply and you care passionately, and that's just so obvious in every single thing that you do.
Thank you.
You really are a light and a delight.
Thank you. Thank you. I believe
And
we've all got it in us, but it gets bashed out of us by life.
I think so. I do think the other thing also, though, is that the world we're moving into post-COVID is going to be a world where that way of interacting with one another, of doing business, is going to be much more important. It is going to be about community. It is going to be about working together. It is about doing what we are doing now. You showcased me, and it's beautiful to be able to exchange, because there are things about you that I've felt but never really touched, and to be able to touch your humanity like this is inspiring, and I'm sure will be inspiring for many.
Thank you so much. I last year started to become very mindful about attracting reciprocation into my space. And for me, it's very important to surround myself with people who understand what reciprocation means. So thank you
I
so
think,
much for reflecting that into my life.
but Melanie, I believe that is actually the new currency. That is the
Yes,
new economy.
yes,
That is the way we are going to be working going forward.
yes,
And you already have started a community, because you've got, with your upcycled collective, you've gone global.
yes, yes. That was kind of a surprise for me. So in 2015, I was reunited with the love of my life. We'd been apart for 15 years, and I I went to live with him on his farm. And suddenly, my old business model, where I was traveling around the country and teaching people, just fell down. And also, it was unsustainable for me. I was once again working harder than I could really sustain physically. And I I've very boldly said to my network, I'm going to create an international network. It's time I get people overseas to know who I am. Everyone in South Africa now knows who I am. Now I need to go out there and do something. And for lack of a better idea, I offered to print up some of my fabrics and send them out to random people overseas to make into other projects that we could then co-create some visual imagery that we could use and just have a conversation about upcycled fabrics. Pete had given me his mom's stash of fabrics after she'd passed away. So I was sitting on this massive stash of motley fabric that I had no idea what to do with. So I started printing it up with some of my prints. I really enjoyed doing the lino printing on the farm. And eventually for this project, I needed a Facebook group to hang the conversation on. And that group went viral very quickly. It mushroomed to 20,000 members in the first 2 years, and we're now sitting at 66,000 members. At the peak of its growth, we were adding 100 new members a day. That growth has slowed down somewhat now. I think because there are more Facebook groups about upcycled fabrics, and also we're doing more quality controls. So we're removing people from the group all the time. So we've got quite a rigorous filtration process, simply because negative behavior on the group very quickly destabilizes it. And also because it's somewhere I've got to go to work every day. It needs to be a nice place to visit. So we've got an admin team of volunteers from all around the world who support that community. And that was also quite a scary process for me because I've never worked with big teams. I've always been a lone ranger very much. And suddenly, in order to maintain the stability of the group, I had to ask for volunteers and work with people that I've never ever laid eyes on. And that for me was very, very frightening. Handing my community over in trust to people that I'd never seen, never smelled, never touched, never hugged. I'm a huggy person. I want to know people. And here I just had to give that trust up and say, I'm going to trust that the universe is going to send me the ones that I need. And today we have a really incredible team that works seamlessly behind the scenes. We've always got somebody looking after that community 24/7, 365 days a year. And there are people that I trust implicitly to have the best interests of the community at heart. So
that's
with it.
Very, no, that's very interesting for me because again, you know, I just went to the dictionary to look at what is fabric. So fabric is cloth produced by weaving or knitting textile fibers. You've been weaving and knitting communities and people together.
Yeah.
It also, the other thing also for me, which was really impactful, is it's the basic structure of a society, culture, activity. For example, the multicultural fabric of South African society. And it's the basic structure with all the customs and beliefs that make it work successfully. And again, what you've done is you've built an incredible community. And I think community is so important going forward. And you've been an incredible example and leader in that. And again, you know, social fiber, and again, you say you started alone, but social fiber is defined as living or preferring to live in a community rather than alone.
Yes.
But that takes trust. It takes courage. It takes resilience. It means that the values need to be together and shared. And again, it's almost like you've got a recipe for us to work together moving into the new world post-COVID.
Yes, yeah. I would never have plotted out this career for myself in a million years. And as it unfolds, I'm amazed every day at the gifts it gives me. It's been my journey of self-discovery more than anything else.
And I think that is what we're all here to do, is to self-discover and to take our unique gifts and share them with the world. And you share so generously. And I think that also comes from a really special place inside, because again, I don't think that nobody can be me. Many
Yes.
people can do what I do, but they will do it in their unique way. And it's the same with you. So you don't feel by sharing, you're giving anything away. You are adding value and passing on and paying forward, which is also for me such a really beautiful, beautiful thing.
Thank you. Thank you.
And
I do feel I do feel that it's the water runs through me. I'm not the vessel. I'm not a vessel. I'm a pipe. If that makes any sense.
Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. It's flow. You create flow.
Yes.
And then for me, there's a beautiful saying that has come up again and again, looking through things, and that is, together we can do more.
Yes.
And
Absolutely.
I think that is such a beautiful mantra for us to be using now. Together, we're together apart, but can you imagine when we're together, how much more we can do?
Yes. Yes. I was actually listening to a very interesting podcast on NPR last night, where they were saying that the reason that humanity has been so successful on the evolutionary scale is because we have the ability to work together in a flexible way. So
Yeah.
that's definitely.
And COVID certainly has made us be a little bit more flexible than we were before.
Yes.
And I think flexibility is the key to actually getting through these challenging times.
One of my favorite sayings is, "Blessed are the flexible, for they shall not be bent out of shape."
Oh, I love that. I absolutely love that. Melanie, for people that are listening and kind of thinking, gosh, I wish I had the courage, I wish I had the vision, I wish I had the resilience, the resourcefulness, what kind of message would you give to them?
Don't wish, just do. If there's something welling up in your heart, just do it. So a month ago, when I started doing these interviews, I didn't know what they were for, but it was just a message that came up in my heart. This is what the space needs right now. And I just jumped in. I was like, I don't have any makeup with me here. I've got limited equipment. I don't know what I'm doing. I just put the message out there and said to people, please come and tell your stories. And the response that I've received has been incredible. Every single one of these interviews I do, I learn something new. So don't wait, don't wish, do.
I love it. I absolutely love it.
Thank you.
Really, really love it. And I wish you success. I watch your journey with interest and have watched it with interest over the years. But and each time it gets richer. So I'm really curious to see what the next steps are going to be. And I'm sure you're not even aware now, but you will know when the time is right.
Absolutely. I'm really looking forward to seeing what unfolds from this.
Awesome. Melanie, thank you. Thank you for your time, for your energy, and for the incredible contribution that you have made to the world and to all of those who follow you.
It's such a pleasure. Thank you for your time to do this with me today.
Pleasure. It's been an honor.